My concern, well, all of concerns, but what I'll talk about a little bit tonight is the specific concerns around water. As Andrea says, bitumen is not your grandfather's oil. It's got the consistency of peanut butter, and if it's not refined on site, the way they get it through pipelines is to dilute it with liquid chemicals like benzene, so that moves it through the pipelines. So it is very, very dangerous stuff. It's the most dangerous energy on earth. Perhaps the toxic fracked oil from the Bakken fields is in a different way is as bad because of its explosivity. But when this stuff, when it spills, it sinks, and this is a really important thing to know. That it's not like crude. It doesn't stay on the top. It's not as accessible to remove. This bitumen, the use of it, wherever they refine it, uses and destroys huge, vast amounts of water. And as I say, when there's a spill, this dilbit, this diluted bitumen, sinks. There was the famous case in 2010 in Kalamazoo that Andrea talked about, and just to remind us that 4 million liters of tar sands dilbit sunk to the bottom of the river system there, and they have not been able to recover most of it. It's still there all these 4.5 years later. Billion-dollar cleanup has not begun to take care of the issues, and of course, very much as Sherry talked about, you have all of the, the residual mess that gets left for the farmers and the fishers and everyone else. Energy East will cross over 1,000 watersheds between Hardisty, Alberta, and St. John, New Brunswick, 1,000 precious watersheds. And this would put drinking water for many millions of Canadians at risk, as well as fisheries, tourism, just nature itself. I mean, one of the issues that I've been involved with more and more recently is the whole concept of the rights of nature. We have to stop thinking about nature or water as only existing for us. Yes, it's drinking water, but it's also drinking water and life for other species and for the ecosystem itself. The company says, well, don't worry, we've got state-of-the-art capacity. We can get to a pipeline spill in 10 minutes. Well, we figured it out, and a spill of a pipeline of this magnitude, if it spills, could release as much as 1 million liters of this crude in the first 10 minutes before the company could actually get there. Whether they could actually stop it in 10 minutes is, of course, a huge question. Again, I just want to repeat a couple of things Andrea said. I want to talk about the St. Lawrence River because it is so endangered. Part of it is a UNESCO heritage site. The government has recently changed the rules on the size of the tankers that are allowed to ply the St. Lawrence, and now oil tankers as wide as a 13-story building are moving up and down the St. Lawrence, again carrying Alberta crude and others. Already they're shipping tar sands bitumen, the dirtiest energy on earth, down the St. Lawrence to export to Europe. And this is something that's brand new, as Andrea talked about. There's a real movement growing. Many municipalities along the way have said, we have no capacity, we have no resources, we don't know what to do if this stuff spills. One super tanker transported 700,000 barrels of this stuff to Italy, and it's important for us to realize that the Harper government, as well as the Obama administration, want to replace Russian energy in Europe with North American energy, and so the push is on to open this up. And Andrea and I remember standing on a water intake, a beautiful state-of-the-art water system or water management system on Trout Lake in North Bay. And the water treatment brand new facility. Now there was a great big window behind us. Oops. And we got the media, we had a lot of people there. We wanted the backdrop to be this beautiful lake, and we talked about what would happen if there was a spill there, because you could actually see the existing gas pipeline right along the lakeshore. And the manager of the treatment facility said, well, here's what would happen. He took us on a tour and showed us how the intake valves would all be gucked up by, within minutes. And then showed us where the actual pattern would come in, where the oil would come in. And then when we said, and have you got plans for what would happen to this, for the city if this happens? He said, bottled water, kind of with a shrug. I mean, there are no plans in place to deal with this. And one expert report said that only between 5 and 20% of any oil spill of dilbit, of this diluted bitumen, could be extracted or recovered. So we are talking about a massive problem if it spills in the St. Lawrence. And similarly, the Bay of Fundy, Energy East would double the tanker traffic carrying crude in the Bay of Fundy. Each tanker could hold as many as 2.2 million barrels, which is 8 times the amount of oil that was carried, and don't forget, this was conventional oil, that was carried by the Exxon Valdez. And imagine with the spills, with the tides, with the fact that the people who fish there are fishing bottom-dwelling species like lobster, what it would do to the fisheries there, how devastating it would be. And the dispersants that Shuri talked about are likely the same dispersants that would be used in the Bay of Fundy. So we are looking again at just a massive problem. Now, on top of all of this, the Harper government has cut one freshwater regulation protection after another until we really don't have any left. They gutted the Fisheries Act, which basically used to make it a criminal offense to put deleterious materials into our waterways. They gutted the Navigable Waters Protection Act, so that now that 99% of all of our lakes and rivers are totally unprotected from any pipeline carrying any of this stuff on, over, or around it. They gutted the Environmental Assessment Act, and among the 3,000 assessments that were being done at the time they ended that act or gutted it, were a number of pipeline assessments. So again, it's just hands up. They turned the decision-making over to the National Energy Board on all pipelines, but then they said, but the National Energy Board decisions in the end rest with Cabinet. So we really have a situation where Stephen Harper and a couple of guys and the energy industry, a couple of cabinet guys and the energy industry make a decision on all of these pipelines, and it is just simply unacceptable. And we have to build a movement, and most particularly we have to work with First Nations along the route, because really it's only First Nations treaties or potential treaty rights, the right to free, prior, and informed consent, that stands now between us and the government just overwhelmingly imposing these pipelines. I want to remind us, and I won't go into this in any depth, or we'll be here at midnight because it's a topic that gets me going, that we have a global water crisis. It's not as if we have all the water in the world and, you know, screwing up some of it is okay because there's so much else. The new statistics around the world coming in from many, many reports tell us that we are, in fact, a planet running out of clean water. All the things you learned in grade 6, that it was impossible to run out of water because there's this exact amount of water. And I can still remember the diagram that shows it like a river around the planet. Not true. We are polluting, mismanaging, and most importantly, diverting water from where it's needed for a healthy hydrologic cycle to where we want it. That is the entire story in California. California, they say water moves uphill to money. And they have diverted, they have lots of water in California, but they've diverted it through massive engineering, massive pipeline construction, so that it's going to the Central Valley to grow almost all of the almonds in the world, mostly for export. So they're massively exporting water out of that area. Recent study on global groundwater takings said that if the Great Lakes are being pumped as mercilessly as groundwater around the world, the Great Lakes could be, and I quote, bone dry in 80 years. Another statement from the government of the United States, the Department of Agriculture, says that the Ogallala Aquifer, that's the aquifer that goes down the spine of the U.S., will be, and I quote, gone in our lifetime. There's no way to salvage it now. They have 200,000 bore wells pumping it so quickly, mostly for corn ethanol now, which uses way too much water. We should not be fighting fossil fuels with corn ethanol or any other kind of ethanol. But these are major water systems that we couldn't have imagined a few years ago could be imperiled. The last example I'll give you is a recent study that said that since 1990, half the rivers in China have disappeared. We're not just talking pollution, they're gone. They're gone from the you know, the stuff that gets made, that gets, so the virtual water that gets shipped out to the coal-fired hydroelectricity and so on. So what we have a situation of a country that's blessed with water and an area here that's blessed with water. And I would argue that we have a very special responsibility to take care of it. It's not as if there's so much that we can be careless with our water heritage in this country or anywhere. Atlantic Canada is standing on the precipice of a major, major decision, whether to put its people, their health and their safety, and the environment and the fisheries and tourism all at risk in order to help a handful of oil companies, many of them foreign oil companies, get rich. And remember, as Andrea said, this is a pipeline for export. This is not a friendly pipeline bringing Western oil to the east. Or are we going to set ourselves down on the path of sustainability, a sustainable energy future that will create more jobs and that will protect our water? This is a very important decision, because once you put the money into these pipelines, once you put the money into this infrastructure, that good money follows bad, or bad money follows good. You set yourself on a path. And I've seen this all over the world where either big dams or big desalination plants, governments put the money in and then they realize it was probably a mistake, but they've already put $3 billion or whatever into it, and it just becomes its own rolling self. And we become slaves to the technology that's been put in place, and that technology is dictated to us by the oil industry and the politicians like Stephen Harper who sit in the oil industry's pockets. So we need to name this. It needs to become an issue here in Atlantic Canada. We need to join hands right across the whole length of this Energy East pipeline, it will not be the unifying force that perhaps the company wants. It will become a unifying force that we will impose on it, and that is a sensible and sustainable option to Energy East. The Energy East pipeline, it poses risk to us. It's our risk, and I say our, I come from Atlantic Canada, but it's our risk because I also going to come through my community in Ottawa, all of us along the way, and our water all over the country. This is our risk, and it's their reward. It's for nothing else but to make the oil industry richer, and that's the last thing they need to be. So we can and we will build a movement to say no to Energy East. Thank you so much.